This is Sandy Whitlock with NELA Home Team, brokered by eXp Realty. Glad to have you here today for the video. We are sitting here with Ray Cartwright, one of our local home inspectors that I've had the pleasure of working with several times now. I'll let him give a little brief introduction about who he is and what he does.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Ray Cartwright. I have Cartwright Home Inspections. I've been in the area now for probably about 40 years now, so
Okay.
I feel like I grew up here.
You know the area.
I know it very well and everything, and I've been doing the home inspections now for about 4 years now.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
good. Tell us a little bit about what does a home inspection cover?
Home inspection actually covers everything from the roof all the way down to foundation, electrical, plumbing, heat and air. It's really considered a visual inspection. However, we do, most inspectors anyway, I guess I can speak for myself, use some technical tools like thermal meters and things like that for the heat and air.
So from what I've seen in home inspections, you actually measure or check the temperature that's coming out of the vents
Right.
to be sure that it's in the range it's supposed to be in.
Right, we do. Well, we do a couple of things. We actually take a temperature reading from the return, and then we also take temperature readings from the registers, the vents.
Okay.
And we do that for a couple of different reasons. One of the reasons, we want to make sure it is cooling, if it's on the cooling side, and it's in a proper range. We also want to make sure that one part of the house isn't a lot cooler than another part.
Right.
So we want to make sure they're pretty consistent
So
like
all the
that.
zones are the same, consistent. That's good to know when you're
Yeah.
buying a house, because
Sure.
just the buyer doesn't know that without an inspection. Also things like appliances. You run the dishwasher
Right, we
and
do.
turn the oven on,
Right.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we do. We check the hot water heater to make sure if it's tankless or if it's a hot water heater. We'll actually turn those on and make sure that hot water, make sure dishwasher, of course, again, the heat and air, we actually test those as well. Make sure there's no leaks, that kind of thing, so
Yeah, even around the faucets, I've had
Yeah.
inspectors
Oh,
find
yeah.
just a little drip around the knob or something,
Certainly,
but
yeah.
everything's pointed out.
Yeah, and also it depends too, like, some homes are of course built on slab. Other homes are on piers where we actually have to go up underneath the house in the crawl space, and, unfortunately, a lot of times we do find leaks and things like that
Yeah.
underneath the home, so.
And when you mention that, you go up in the attics and stuff
Yeah,
too, right?
yeah, and it's awful hot.
Because a lot of
This time
buyers
year,
want
so,
to
yeah.
know what's up there, but they don't want to go
Right.
themselves.
Yeah, we do that. I mean, there's so many different things that we actually look at, in the attic. We, look, at the structure to make sure. We look at the roof decking. If there's a furnace in the attic, we want to make sure that it's vented. Had a brand new construction home yesterday brand new home that had a gas furnace in the attic that apparently the roofers completed the job before the air conditioner was put in, so it wasn't vented.
Yeah.
So we check things like that. Also check to make sure that exhaust vents in the kitchen, if it's that particular type, to make sure it's vented through the exterior and so on and so forth. So
Well, that's why it's important, even on a new build home, to get an inspection.
certainly.
Because they do their job, they do it well, it's a new home, but there's always a punch list, and it's always good to make sure everything's
Right.
done right. So typically, when you get a home inspection, I know your price, does it depend on the square footage of the house, or tell us a little bit about pricing?
Right, each individual state inspector, they can determine their own pricing. Typically in this area, the baseline price is probably $250. That'd be about the minimum.
Okay.
And then it would go up from there, depending on, and most of them depend on the square footage of the home and things like that, and where the home's located. And some of them actually charge a little bit more for homes that are on crawl spaces because it's a little bit more difficult getting up underneath the home, so.
So we were talking about the cost of a home inspection. When is it paid?
Normally it's paid at the time of the inspection
Okay.
by the client, and I take everything from cash, check, credit card, debit card, so, and I think most of the home inspectors do as well.
So you do have a way to take a
Yeah.
card there on, because they pay you at the site when you
That's
give them the
correct.
report.
That's
or
correct.
go
That's the
over
way
the
it works.
report.
That's the way it works with me, yes.
Okay. I think that's the way it's worked with every inspector I've worked with,
Right.
so good. Tell me about maybe some of the things that a home inspection would not cover.
Okay, typical home inspection would not cover like termites, for example. That'd be a pest control company. Also, wouldn't cover anything like a septic
Okay.
system like that. We don't really do that. Those are special trades. Visual inspection, and if we find things that are wrong, if I find something that's wrong, then I would recommend that the licensed contractor take a look at a rafter that may be cut, you know.
And also, you can't punch holes in sheetrock and see what's behind walls and stuff like that
No.
either. So there's that little area that you
Yeah.
just have no control over
Yeah,
still.
that is correct. That and like the flooring, you know, we look at the flooring, but a lot of times flooring has carpet on it, something like that, and we can't actually see underneath the flooring. Now, we can if it's on a crawl space, if it's on a pier, home that's built on piers, we can go in, we can look at the subflooring and things like that, but a home that's on a slab, you know, that we can't really look at something that's hidden like that.
Do you cover things like asbestos? Is asbestos or it's not, or? do you
Right,
just-
well, we typically, when we find something like that, we will recommend, you know, that
It
like
could be.
asbestos, it could be, same thing with like mold, for example. I know that's a big thing, big item, that if we see something that, it could possibly be mold, but we don't, or I personally don't, you know, ever say that is mold. I think
Right.
that really needs to be tested before you could actually
'Cause there's
determine
different
something like that.
varieties.
But yeah, like asbestos like that, asbestos siding and stuff like that, we'll identify that is asbestos siding or something like that. So,
Okay.
Also, don't walk on all roofs. We don't get on top of all roofs depending on how steep it is. You know, I would estimate that probably 80% of the roofs I do climb, but if they're extremely steep, that's something that state inspectors that I know that a lot of them, you know, don't do. So,
Speaking of roof and some of the other things that may come up, if it is something that you see needs attention, do you recommend having like a roofer
Certainly.
do the roof and an
yeah,
AC guy?
yeah. If it's for an example, if it's a home that you know, if I can't climb on the roof, if it's too steep to climb, typically I'll take a ladder and I'll move the ladder around the house at different viewpoints and view the roof cover from that angle and the flashing and the vents and so on and so forth. And then typically I would recommend a licensed roofing contractor for a full evaluation.
So you do inspect all these areas of the house, you cover the
Right.
whole house. However, there are things that a professional maybe would need to come
Yeah.
in.
Correct. I mean, if it's something that we see that, for another example, if we see cracks in the siding and we see it going down into the foundation, you know, we may recommend that a structural engineer take a look at that, because we want to make sure that everything's right when the client is actually moving in.
How long does an inspection usually take?
Typical inspection, probably a good average would be about 2 hours for the physical part of the inspection. And, you know, some inspectors actually create the report on site. I don't really do that. For me personally, I could do that, but I like to take about 2 hours because I want to go through the inspection and go over it a couple of times before I actually submit it and send it to the client like that.
Now, when you say 2 hours.
Well, 2 hours on the physical part of the inspection, and then typically if I do an inspection at 3 o'clock in the afternoon and the client shows up at 5, I'll do a walkthrough with them and go over any kind of major deficiencies I may find in the home. And then after that, when I leave, usually within an hour or so, I'll email that report to them.
Okay.
That's my process.
That's kind of what I was wondering, because typically I think you'll show up for the appointment, spend the 2 hours doing the
Right.
inspection, then the client will show up at the end.
Right.
And then you go over it with them.
Yeah,
Okay.
correct. And
Is the realtor usually present too for the client?
you know, that usually the realtor is there, and I encourage the realtor to be there at the end of the inspection. And there are occasions that the realtor will stay there through the whole process, but normally they don't. Normally, I mean, we're all insured as well, you know, so I don't really see a need in the realtor staying there the whole time. However, some of them do. But I do think it's important that the realtor is there with the client at the very end of the inspection, so when I go over things, you know, they'll hear the same thing that I'm telling the client as well. And also, one other thing too, when I email the report, I always encourage the client to allow me to email the report to the realtor as well, because y'all are the ones that actually spend most of the time with the client explaining things to them like that.
And it does help a lot
Yeah.
for me to have a copy of the report, as well as the buyer to have a copy, so I have the stuff in writing of what he pointed out too, because I have to relate it then to, or relay it then to the selling agent and their clients, so
Right.
it helps a lot to have that in front of me. However, you do have to get permission for me
True.
to get a copy of it.
Definitely do, yeah.
Is there any other things you would like to point out how this benefits the buyer by getting a home inspection and?
Well, I think that, I think it's crucial really for, of course I would, being in the position I'm in, but I really think it's crucial that everyone that's purchasing a home, I mean, that's a huge investment, and, it's sad when I hear the stories about people that don't get an inspection, and they get to a house and there are so many unseen items that could go wrong, and, they start having plumbing issues and, start having things that go out that we may have been able to prevent those and everything.
Exactly.
And on the flip side of that, if you have a home inspection, I've never had a home inspection and I didn't find something. I
Right.
mean, never, there hasn't been one time that, there's always something, but even if there's only a few different items that are found, at least you know that you're really getting a good, you're getting a good deal for what you're paying for. So,
Right.
yeah.
For the little bit of money it costs up
Yeah.
front, it's definitely worth the peace of mind. I recommend to all my buyers for a home inspection. So there's always something that does show up, just like Ray said, maybe a closet that doesn't have a light bulb in it, or a doorknob that's loose and just needs tightening, where those are not really things I would think that would normally break a deal. However, you need to know, little things as well as big things that go on in the home that you're purchasing.
Right, and some of the things too, like even the electrical outlets and everything,
Some of them may not work.
right,
and, yeah.
again, brand new construction home yesterday evening, had 2 outlets that weren't working,
Yeah. So they look good when you walk
Yeah,
in, and you're
and
like,
we-
I've got an outlet here.
And
but-
we also too, we take or I say we, and I'm assuming that the other inspectors do it as well, and I'm sure that they do, but take the electrical panel, the cover off the electrical panel, and
Right.
we look at the wiring to make sure the wiring is, the correct size, and that there's no, what they call double tap, and, and things of that nature, so, can be some safety concerns as well. So, yeah.
Well, Ray, I want to thank you for being here
Thank you.
today.
Well,
It was
thank you. I was
really a
glad to
pleasure
be here.
talking to you, and I think we got a lot of good information out. Hopefully
Right.
the buyers will agree, and if they have any questions, they can definitely ask more questions with the links that we provide, or make a phone call to either one of us, right?
That'd be great.